Hello everyone, and welcome to part 3 of how to make a FNAF Scratch game tutorial. This is episode 3, and today we will be covering the camera system and the power system. Let's get right into it. So the first thing you're going to want to do is obviously set up a way for a camera to be opened. So we're going to hover over and make a new sprite, and we're going to make the little button that we hover our mouse over to open up our camera menu. Alright, so here you can see I quickly threw together a little button. I'm actually going to make two costumes of this. I'm going to call this one up, and I'm going to call the second one down. And for the down sprite, I'm just going to flip it vertically, because when we're seeing it, to flip the camera up, we'll tap that. To flip it back down, we'll tap that. So when I receive menu screen, we need to stop other scripts in the sprite and hide. Then when we receive night start, we need to choose where it goes. I'm going to set its size to 80. I like 80, and we're going to put it directly in the center right here. Pretty close in the center. So I'm obviously going to set its size to 80. Going to move it where I want it, which is going to be 0, -160. And then we are going to set its ghost effect to, I'm going to say 50. And then we are going to show it and make sure it goes to front as well. Okay, let's just check, make sure that shows up how it should. Oh my goodness, that's very loud. There it is, it's down there. Exactly where we need it. I'm going to name this sprite camera button. Then to make this look a little nicer, we can grab a repeat until and put an if else inside. Say if touching mouse pointer, set the ghost effect to 0, or else set the ghost effect to 50. And if you take a look, what that'll do is it'll make it look just a little bit nicer, something we like to see, where it's ghost effect, when you hover over it, it lights up. Now let's actually set up the way for the camera to open. So inside of this if statement, we're going to need to put an if else and put mouse down to sense if it's clicking the button. We will then wait until the mouse is not down, and after making sure the mouse isn't down, we're going to make a variable called camera state, and we'll set up a few functionalities for what this can be. We're going to say camera states. 1 is going to be down, 2 will be up, 3 will be opening, 4 will be closing. Same kind of system that we're doing for the doors. So what we can do is, after this clicking, we can do some checks real quick by saying if else, going to your operators and grabbing an equals, going to variables and pulling out your camera state and putting it in the first half, checking if the camera is down, so 1. Then what we need to do is switch the costume down, setting our camera state to opening, so 3. Then we can duplicate what we just made and put it in the else statement and set the if to a normal if. We'll then need to check if the camera is up, so 2, in which we'll set the costume to up and switch the camera state to 4, which is closing. Go ahead and save that. Now what we can do is start setting up how our camera is going to work. I'm going to import a camera animation, which you can find in the link in the description. After implementing that, you'll see this camera animation sprite where you will see several frames of the camera being lifted. You can feel free to adjust these frames, obviously, however you'd like. Just know that once this camera is up, you can actually see that I did keep a border around the entirety of it. Inside of this animation, we need to do when I receive menu screen, stop other scripts in the sprite, and hide. When I receive night start, we will put a repeat until down. Then we will grab an if else statement. Don't forget to throw in a show and a go to front layer right before that repeat until, where we will check inside of the if else, grab an equals and put it in, and we will check if the camera state is down or 1, and if it is, we will switch our costume to down, which if you take a look, down has no sprite at all, so it can be shown just as it needs to. Then we'll check if the camera state is up or 2. Again, you can always check by coming into your button and taking a look at the comment we made. We will switch our costume to up. If our camera state is 3 or opening, we need to set up the opening animation by switching the costume to opening 1, and then repeating however many costumes you have, same like the door when we had the door opening and closing, in my case is 8, and putting a next costume in this repeat loop, and then switching the costume to the final opening, which is opening 9. Then we will need to set the camera state back to up, which is 2, and we will need to run a broadcast called camera up. Don't forget that at this point we need to double check and make sure it goes to the front layer, and that should be all we need for that part. Duplicate the if else again and put it underneath, where we need to make sure if it is closing, which is 4, and inside of here we will need to broadcast camera down, set our opening to opening 9, and then just like how we did with the door, grabbing a switch costume 2, putting a minus bubble inside, putting a 1 in the second bubble, and putting costume number in the first. Switching the costume to down, setting the camera state to down or 1, and you can get rid of the broadcast camera up and go to front layer. Save that and set this final if else to just a normal if, and we should be able to see this working, but keep in mind that we do need to set the camera state to 1 on night start. We hover over, and as we click the button, the animation plays, but we see it's not in the right spot. That's easily fixable. All you need to do is set its position to 0, 0 and move that right here. You'll see the camera plays just as it should. You see when it's up, we have these borders just as we should. Everything works just as intended. Now we need to set up our camera screens. Inside of this camera kit template that you could download in the link in the description, you should also get a sprite called camera screens. Inside of this camera screen, you will get my original old designs for all of the characters. I remember Ugly having way more wrinkles than that. And this is a very inefficient way of setting up how I did this. We have way too many costumes than what we need. We can make this much easier. I'm going to show you how to do that right now. All I want you to do is keep in mind this blank costume, because this blank costume is what you'll need to use when you design a new camera angle. Keep in mind that when using this exact size, to not alter the size of the square, because everything inside of it will be shown. Everything outside of the square, including the black line itself, will not be visible when in use. So I'm going to redesign my cameras, and by redesign, I mean I'm going to take my stage and just use the empty versions of all of them. So I'm free to remove everything else besides the empty stages. Here we can see I now have all of my rooms, but empty. Again, if you're wanting to make more, simply duplicate this blank sprite, design what you want, and name it. Here we have our normal cameras, and I'm making this much more simple from the first tutorial, since the first one overcomplicated the camera system way more than what needed to be done. So all we need to set up is come to the coding menu and grab when I receive menu screen. We are going to stop other scripts in the sprite and hide the sprite. When we receive camera up, we need to choose a camera number. So we're going to make a variable called camera number to keep track of where we are. By default, every time the camera comes up, I'm going to make sure the camera gets set to 1. Say when your player closes your camera, they were on camera 5, and when they open their camera, you want them to be on camera 5 again. What you can do is grab a when I receive block and choose night start and set camera to 1. And then upon camera up being broadcasted, you don't have to set the camera variable at all. It'll just be what it was at when they close the camera. We're going to show the camera screens and have them go to 0, 0. We're going to then grab a repeat until, and then here I'm going to make it look like the cameras are panning back and forth. Inside of this repeat until, we are going to put another repeat until. Inside of here, what we're going to do is we're going to grab a greater than symbol. If you're using my template, feel free to follow this exactly. If you're not, you'll have to mess around with these numbers and figure out what works for you. Inside, I'm going to put 56. And I'm going to go to motion and put an X position in the first bubble. Then I'm going to grab change X by block and change this by 0.5. This is going to control the speed at how fast it tilts from left to right. Then we're going to set our X position to 56, which is how far it should be, equal to this right here. Go to control and wait how long you want it to wait before it starts panning in the other direction. I'm going to say 1.5 seconds since that works for me. I'm then going to duplicate what we just made and put it underneath. In this X position, I'm going to swap this to a less than symbol and change the second number to -53. Again, if you're not copying me exactly, this number will probably be different for you. We're going to change 0.5 to -0.5, and we're going to set our X to -53, and wait another 1.5 seconds. Now we're going to duplicate the when I receive menu screen and just swap out menu screen for camera down. Hit save, and we should be able to test what it looks like. When we open up our cameras, we'll see that the camera shows as it should, and it pans back and forth. We'll fix this door glitch in a moment. You can see it pans back and forth just as we want it to. When you close it, it goes away. Let's quickly fix these door problems. Inside of your left door button, what we're going to do is inside of our repeat until, we're going to check the camera state. Put an if underneath this show and hide script, and we're going to grab an OR block and put an equals inside of it. We're going to check if our camera state is either 2, 3, or 4. This being up, opening, and closing. Remove what we just created, and instead drag this if else into this repeat until. Drag what we previously had in the repeat until and put it into the else output, and put hide into the if. If we take a look now, we'll be able to see that the door shows just fine, but upon opening up the camera, we can no longer see it. While testing around with this, you may have also noticed that even though the door button is not visible, it can still be used. To solve that problem, we're going to duplicate what we just had again. We're going to put it inside of this other night start script. Simply slide it right into the top under this first repeat, drag everything that we want into the else, and leave the top half empty. Now if we test the game, we'll see that even when the button disappears, we still won't be able to use it. But when the camera comes down, it becomes usable again. Now repeating this process is very easy. Simply grab this bit of code that we created and put it into your left door, your left light button, your right door button, your right light button, and your right door. Inside of this left door, you're going to put this only right in this follow section, where you'll grab what we put and put it into the else, and put hide in the top half. The light button is pretty easy as well. Put it in the first repeat until, move the code, and put a hide in the if. You'll want another one to put inside of the repeat until, move everything into the else, and leave the top half empty. Right door button, we've done it before. Put it in, move the code, put a hide in the top. Second half, put the loop in, move the code to else, leave the top half empty. The right light button, put it in the first repeat, move the code, put a hide in the top, put it in the second half, move the code, leave the top empty. Final door, just put it in the first forever loop, move the code, put a hide in the top. Take a look and see if that solved the problem. You can see that the doors are no longer visible and they can't be used. Now let's set up your camera's map. The camera map actually has very little code. Let's set that up real quick. We're going to create a sprite and you're just going to map out what your building looks like. Here I've quickly put together mine. As you can see, we will have the stage, the big room, the bathroom, the 2 halls, and the corners, and then showing where we are. You'll want to decide where you want this on your map. Usually you'll see it in the bottom corner. I'm going to put it at the top. For the code, again, it's pretty easy. When we receive menu screen, stop other scripts in the sprite, and hide. Then when we receive camera up, we will go to the designated spot that we want it. We will show it, go to the front layer, and then go backwards however many buttons you're going to have. If we count how many I'll have, I will have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I will have 7 buttons that you use to transfer through the cameras. So I will move backwards 7 layers to make sure that our map doesn't come over top of our buttons. Then duplicate menu screen and do when I receive camera down. Hit save, and that's really all you need. If we take a look, we'll see that when we come into the night, and we see that when we open up the camera, the map shows where it should be. Now let's set up the camera buttons. In the link in the description with that camera kit, you should have also gotten costumes for every single button. Feel free to change them however you want. So let's make a new sprite and call it cam1 button. And I'm going to upload the 2 costumes. I'm going to have you show your camera map so that you can freely place the button where you want it to go. I'm going to say right here. Before we add in the other ones, let's quickly program what this one has to do. When I receive menu screen, stop other scripts in the sprite, and hide the sprite. Then, when we receive camera up, you'll need to go to its designated location, show, and go to the front layer. Duplicate your menu screen and switch the broadcast to camera down. Now let's set up how it actually transfers you to the correct camera. Duplicate your when I receive camera up and remove the code. Underneath this one, you'll need to repeat until, and inside, you'll grab an if-else statement. Put an equals block inside and set the second bubble to 1. Grab your camera number variable and put it in the first half. Since this is cam 1, we're checking if the camera is equal to 1. If it is, we will set the costume to on. If we are not currently on that camera, we are going to set the costume to off. Grab an if statement and put it underneath, and inside, put an and operator. Put touching mouse pointer and mouse down. We're going to sense if you are clicking the button. If you click the button, we are going to wait until you are not clicking the button, and then we can set the camera to 1, because again, we're clicking the camera 1 button. I'm going to upload a sound that I'm going to use when the button is clicked. It sounds like that. And I'm going to start the camera beep sound. That's all the code for your button. Let's duplicate the button and rename it to cam2 button. And I'm going to upload the 2 costumes for 2 and delete the originals. Inside, I'll need to decide where I want it, change the X and Y positions, change this camera number to 2, switch the costumes to the correct names, and switch the set camera to 2 as well. I'm going to do this for the remainder of my buttons. I just finished setting up all of my camera buttons by copying the same exact code as we did for 1 and 2. So taking a look at what it looks like now, and open up the camera, we can see all the buttons are where they should be. And as we click through the buttons, they switch to the colors. If I'm at 4 and I close the camera and reopen it, you'll see that we are still at 4. Let's set up the functionality so it actually looks like we're transferring through the cameras. Inside of our camera screens, we have a little bit of code to set up, but nothing hard. So upon receiving night start, what we will need to do is grab a repeat until. What we're going to want to do is order our cameras to our camera buttons. And what I mean by that is if I hide our darkness, you will see that camera 1, I want to be my stage. So we'll come into our costumes and make sure that the stage is on top. You can keep this blank here because we will still be able to work around it. 2 is going to be the big playroom, and I have that there. 3 is going to be the back room, so the third is going to be the bathrooms. 4 is going to be my left hall. 5 is my right hall. 6 is my left corner, so I'm going to drag my left corner up. And then 7 is my right corner, exactly how I want it. Now again, you'll still see that they're 1 off. Don't worry about that. You can technically have as many off as you want from the top as long as they are in order. And I'll show you how to do that. So we are going to switch costume to grab an addition symbol and put it inside and put a 1 in the second bubble. This 1 is however many costumes we have before our first camera. Since I have 1, which is this blank, 1 plus 1 is 2, which is going to be what we need. Set your camera number in there. So if camera number is 1, we are going to switch costume to 2, which 2 is really our first camera. That's really all you need to do. Switch this receive night start to camera up. Let's take a look. All right, let's open up our camera and see if it works. We're on costume 1, and that switches it to 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. Fantastic, and as we see, we can close the camera and reopen it, and we'll still be on the correct camera. Now, let's move on to the second part of this tutorial, which is setting up our power system. So, setting up the power should be fairly easy. In the last tutorial I made teaching you how to make a 5 Nights at Freddy's game, I gave you a download that had 100 costumes in it. That is a very inefficient way to do that, and I have a much more effective way to do that now, and this is what we'll use. In the link in the description below, you'll find a download where you can download a sprite file. That sprite file is going to be a text-based clone system, which was developed by GriffPatch, so I'm going to import that now. I actually have it in my backpack, so we're just going to drag this in here. You'll see all of this stuff in this text engine. It looks much more confusing than it is. So to start off, we can delete what it says to delete here. Then you can delete this big long one too. So what you're going to want to focus on is this block. You'll get a block called print. So if we take a look and drag out this block, we can show you exactly what it does. So print, this first bubble is what you want it to print. Say you want it to say power 95%. Then you have the X and Y value where it's going to show up. So you want it to start at 0, 0, you type in 0, 0, And then you have the type. The modification of GriffPatch's text engine had added a few things. We have a glitch type, a matrix type, an appear type, a twirl type, a bounce type, a float type. So what would make most sense for FNAF is to use the appear type, since it just literally makes it show up. You can mess around with any of these other ones to get some more special fun effects. So I'm going to put in here appear as the type. If we run this, you'll see that it shows it right there. It runs power and it says 95. That looks super great. A little big for our liking, right? So the size is completely controlled by the size of the actual sprite. We'll see here by default it'll be 300. That's not what we want. Let's switch it down to 100 and see how that feels. 100's a little small. I'm going to try ramping it up to 150. And there, 150 looks pretty much how I want it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show just the normal actual sprite, not a clone. I'm going to drag it where I want it. I think right there is really good. So I'm going to replace this X to -229 and my Y to 167. That you'll see is just where we placed that. I'm going to go ahead and up here put 150 as the size above this. This will set up our system for actually putting out the power. But we have to make a variable for power. So let's make a variable and call it power. I'm going to rename this text engine to the power system. When we receive the menu screen, we are going to stop other scripts in the sprite and hide. When we receive night start, we will actually begin generating how this works. On the beginning of the night, we are going to set the power to 100, since it'll obviously start at 100. We need another variable that'll calculate the power usage. We're going to set power usage to 1. The reason we're going to do this is because if you remember from a FNAF game, even if you're not closing the doors or using the lights or checking the cameras, your power will still go down. And we're going to keep our power usage at a 1 at the beginning of the night to really set up that basis of how it's going to use power. Then right after selecting the power and the power usage, we're going to set the size and print the power. The way we're going to print power is by grabbing a join block, typing power with a colon, and then we're going to grab the power variable and put it inside and put this join right in the print location. Take a look when you start up the project and hit continue. You'll see that the power just shows up right at the top, right where we want it. You'll see it's a little uncomfy and weird looking there. So what I'm going to do is duplicate menu screen, and when we receive camera up, it's going to remove this stuff. Then we're going to duplicate the night start script, and we're going to replace night start with camera down and remove the power usages and just add this in. We can make this a little better even, a little bit more efficient. If we go to my blocks and create a new block and call it update power. And update power, we're going to have just be set size and our power script. Now we can remove what we made here, put update power underneath night start, and when we receive camera down, just run update power. The power shows up when we open up the camera, it disappears. When we close the camera, it reappears, but you'll also see that does it a whole bunch, which is obviously not what we want. So underneath menu screen and camera up, you'll want to come to control and throw in a delete this clone underneath both. Now we have 9 clones, which is how many we need. When we open up the camera, they all disappear, pull it back down, and they show up where they should. Now we actually have to set up how the power decreases. Since we're using stop other scripts in the sprite, we will need to make another sprite to set up the power usage system. So let's make a new sprite and make no asset for it and call it power usage system. Inside of power usage system, we're obviously going to drag out a when I receive menu screen, stop other scripts in the sprite, and although there's no asset, I'm still going to choose hide anyways. Now we have to create a way for the power to be decreased. So what we're going to do is grab a when I receive and set this to night start. Inside of here, we're going to grab a repeat until. Now we need to decide how long it's going to take for it to decrease our power based on the usage. I think every 3 seconds is perfectly fine. However, we are free to change how that works throughout the nights. So the way FNAF works is the timer in which it decreases power actually changes throughout each night. You can set this up however you'd like. For example, if you wanted each night to be different, what you could do is put an if else in here and grab an equals. Take your night number and put it in the first half and say if your night is 1, it'll wait 4 seconds. Every 4 seconds, we're going to decrease power. So that would be changing power, come to join and put a join inside, put a dash in the first half for a negative, and then put power usage in the second bubble. change power by negative power usage. Then say night 2 had a different way of doing it. So we do night 2, and maybe in night 2, every 3.5 seconds it decreases power. On night 3, every 3 seconds it decreases power. On night 4, every 2.5 seconds it takes to decrease power. And on night 5, the most difficult of the normal nights, every 2 seconds will decrease power. I personally think any less than 2 makes the game unreasonably unfair. So what I do is cut off your if and put an or inside. Say if the night is 5 or 6, then it'll wait 2 seconds and cut the power usage. For your custom night, usually what games do is the custom night actually takes the timing from night 4. You make an extra if else, put your thing in, and say if it's 7, it'll be the same time as night 4. This is to make it reasonably fair. If you want to make it harder, that's totally up to you. You can do whatever you want. It's your game. I'm just saying, I feel making the power slightly easier than the previous nights on your custom night will overall make your multiple 20 mode that much better. Fantastic. There's your usage system. Now we actually have to set up how it decides what's being used. In the door sprite after the animation is finished. Right here it sets the left door state to 2, so we're also going to change power usage by 1. We're going to say this door uses 1 power every power change section. Most doors actually use a little more, so I'm going to set my doors to use 2 power. In the right door, we're going to do the same thing. When it sets the door state to 2, we're going to change, not set, the power usage by 2. Light buttons, setting the left door state to 5, we need to change the power usage. I'm going to say lights are just 1. I'd avoid using decimals because then your power text on top will be a decimal 2 unless you used a round block to round it. Come to the right light button, and where it sets the right door state, we're going to change the power usage by 1. The other thing that wastes power is your camera. So we come to the camera button, and setting the camera state to 3 and 4, that's opening and closing, we want it when it sets it to up, which happens inside of the camera animation sprite. So under set camera state to 2, we are going to change the power usage. I'm going to say that the camera also uses 1 power, so we're going to change the power usage by 1. Well, now we need a way to decrease that power usage. So I'm going to come into power usage system, and I'm going to grab a when I receive. So when I receive camera down, we are going to change our power usage by -1. So the power usage goes back down once the camera is brought down. Inside of our left door, where it resets our door state to 1. So when it resets our left door state to 1, we're going to change our power usage by -2, because 2 is how much power I decided the doors are going to use up. On the right door, once it sets the right door state back, we're going to also change the power usage by -2. Inside of the light buttons, when it sets the left door state back to normal, it should also change the power usage by -1. And same thing with the other light button. Cool, let's show our power usage as we play through the game. By default, it is 1. You'll notice that even after the time limit, the power won't go down, but that's because we haven't set it to actually show. The power is going down. So let's close the door and see how the power usage changes. You see the power usage once the door is fully closed is now at 3. And as we open the door back up, it goes back down. The light changes it by 1. If we close both doors, it goes up to 5 power usage. If we open the camera, it goes up to 2. If we close both doors and open the camera, the power usage goes up to 6. Our power usage system is working. Back to the power usage system. After each time it changes the power, we need to make a broadcast called update power. And you can put that underneath each of your change powers. Then coming into power system, we're going to brag out a when I receive, and when we receive update power, we are going to run the update power block. Let's take a look and see if it displays correctly. So every 4 seconds, we should see the power decrease just like that. Now you might notice another problem where our clones are getting dangerously high. This is a very easy fix. Under update power, we need to run a broadcast that should exist already. That broadcast being clear text, and that comes with the power system sprite that you can download in the link in the description. Now the clone should delete every 4 seconds and then reappear. Look at that. Power at 99. 98. If we close our doors, it should go down by a larger amount. There it does. It should go down by an even larger amount now. Look at that. It goes down 5 because our power usage is at 5. And that's all I have for you for this tutorial. It was a little bit of a shorter one. We didn't do as much. That's because we had a little bit more of a complex system when it came to the camera. So thank you all so much for watching. If you liked it, then like it. I really appreciate it. Subscribe to the channel if you'd like more tutorials like this, and let me know what else kind of stuff you'd like to see. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you all in the next one. Peace.